I'm looking forward to working with each and every one of you to make sure that we continue to inspire, continue to change lives.
Well, happy Olympic Day, everyone. It is the 131st birthday of the modern Olympic Games, and to celebrate, we got to watch a great ceremony this morning. The first African and first female president of the IOC started her 8-year term, Kirsty Coventry. We're going to break it all down. We're going to chat about kind of the key themes within her vision, her mission, what we'll miss about Thomas Bach. Of course, I have my good friend, Carissa Donkin here, who was in Greece when they were able to make this decision, the president election a few months ago. Was it now, Carissa? Crazy. Time flies. First of all, how are you today?
Well, I'm great, and happy Olympic Day to you, Britt.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. You're on the go. You're always on the ground getting the key storylines for us, and we're so grateful for it. I'll start with just kind of an open-ended question for you. I want to know, watching that ceremony this morning, what the key takeaways that you noticed?
Yeah, I mean, I think we just have to talk about the moment that it was, right? I mean, this is history in the making. We've never had a woman in this role before. She's the second youngest person to hold this job. She's also the first person from Africa to hold this job. So I think just the moment of her stepping up there, and just the contrast between her and the other people in the room, it does signify change. And I think it's hard not to feel something about that, seeing a woman in that role. And obviously, she won the election back in March. So we knew this moment was coming, but there's something different, I think, to actually see her there holding that key beside Thomas Bach and that handover. And you could see even Thomas Bach being a little bit emotional about it. I think it was just kind of a cool moment.
Yeah, and we both joked, she's got her pink power suit on. She seemed kind of ready to take over with a bit of a statement. I love one thing she mentioned before we kind of dive into Thomas Bach. She had said one of the things that he had told her when she was on the IOC Athletes Commission, she was in the back row of these large meetings. And he said, even though you're in the back row, I expect your hand to be raised almost at all times. And to me, that was really impactful, because as an athlete, you might volunteer for roles or you might sit in on a meeting, but you never really know if your impact is heard necessarily or your voice matters in these rooms. And so for him to tell her that when she had just, recent retirement, she's still finding her groove in this world of kind of where she wants to be and the impact she wants to leave on sport. So I thought that was really special. And I wondered if you can kind of tie a bow on Thomas Bach's legacy when it comes to the Olympic movement.
For sure, yeah. And I think a lot of people kind of draw a line between her and Thomas Bach, because he was her preferred she was his preferred candidate going into the election. And, so a lot of people have questioned, like, how significantly different is, this going to be compared to what we saw with Thomas Bach. But just to talk about his tenure for a second, so over 12 years, I mean, I think most people would call it a success over that time. Obviously, he faced some really significant challenges, the biggest, of course, being a global pandemic. I think the fact that we were able to have 2 Olympic Games even happen during that time, I think is, undoubtedly a success. The way he put it back in March, Britt, is he said he didn't have a period at all, really, in his 12-year tenure where he didn't have something on his desk that was like an existential issue for either the games or the Olympic movement. So we talked about the pandemic, but there's also, the Russian doping scandal and Russia's invasion of Ukraine. And I think, the handling of that is where we probably have seen the most criticism of Thomas Bach's performance. And I think a lot of people would have liked to have seen him go a little bit further in terms of how he handled Russia. I think particularly coming out of Sochi in 2014. So, there is that part of it. But when we look on the other side of what he did, I mean, there were changes to the way the Olympic bidding process happened. And then I think, maybe his biggest parting gift of all, Britt, just as he's going out the door financially, he signs this massive deal, or agrees to this massive deal with NBC worth about $3 billion US in rights. So that puts the organization on pretty good financial footing going into Coventry's tenure.
It is such a good point. You look at, what the last 12 years in the Olympic movement has looked like. It's been, I can't even imagine. He's done quite phenomenal work as an athlete that got to compete in the Olympics while he was the leader. I have nothing but positive things to say. I wondered though with Kirsty, I mean, I know her as an Olympic champion in swimming, and I know her for countless reasons of ways she's, made strides in the sport world. But I'd love to hear from your perspective what you think is special about her, some of her goals and her vision for what she wants to do at the IOC.
Yeah, I think going into the presidential election back in March, I mean, she was considered one of the front runners, but nobody thought that she was going to win on the first ballot. There was sort of, gasps in the room when it was, announced so quickly that she was the winner, even though she was, as I said earlier, Thomas Bach's preferred candidate. So, I mean, of course, she's the first woman to hold the job. She's the first leader of the IOC from Africa. She's the second youngest. So, I mean, that alone, makes her unique. And I think the hope, particularly with her age, Britt, is that she's going to be able to figure out how to leverage that engagement with younger people and get younger people engaged and interested in the Olympics. One word we've heard her say a lot is collaboration. That came up a lot in her manifesto. And, she talked about it again today. She talked about it just before before the handover this week too. She said she plans to listen to, a lot of outside voices, whether that be athletes. Obviously, that's a world that she's been a part of fairly recently, or even just, listening to more IOC members. I mean, there are quite a few of them, but that doesn't mean that everybody has an equal amount of power or, maybe did have an equal amount of power during Bach's tenure. So I think the thought is that she's going to be a little bit more, open in how she makes decisions. At least that's, sort of what I think a lot of her campaign was centered around. But Britt, I think really, when we look back, however long it is, when she no longer has this role, I think, how we look at whether her term was a success or not is how she handled, the instability and maybe some of the challenges that haven't even, come across her desk yet.
Yeah, and we said with Thomas Bach, he experienced quite a lot of challenging situations. Kirsty Coventry is not walking into an easier cakewalk by any means. The state of the world is in an unfortunate situation right now. And so I wondered from your perspective, what are some of the key things she's going to immediately have to start to dive deeper into?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, again, she's talked a lot about athletes and empowering athletes. But I think a lot of what, how we look at her term and whether it's a success is how she deals with climate change, right? I mean, that's the biggest issue, the biggest existential issue that I think she'll be facing. And, we know that it's going to impact games into the future. We know that the planet is warming. There's no debate about that. So that is going to be a massive thing that she's going to have to deal with. And she talked about that a little bit in her manifesto, but not as much as some of the other candidates. So it's going to be interesting to see what she does there. I mean, she mentioned, making the games more sustainable, but we didn't see kind of, I would say, a concrete plan on how she's going to, climate proof the Olympic Games. And then the other one, Britt, which will come as a surprise to nobody, is, how she deals with Donald Trump. So the games are going to the US in 2028 in LA. So she's going to have to deal with him pretty quickly. And she actually had a quote back in March. This was the night that she was announced as the winner, and she said, quote, "I've been dealing with, let's say, difficult men in high positions since I was 20 years old. First and foremost, what I've learned is that communication will be key, and that is something that will happen early on." So obviously she's going to have to sit down with President Trump and find some common ground with him. And I think that's going to be the first thing on her to-do list. And how that looks and when those meetings happen will be really interesting to see, I think.
Well, it is going to be definitely something we're going to have to keep an eye on. So Carissa will be tapping you in for all of those conversations. I think one of my biggest takeaways of watching her this morning as well is she said, like, her daughters were her motivation to get here, but her daughters are also her motivation to continue this movement forward, knowing that change is absolutely, it's not a maybe at this point. It's inevitable. What are we going to do about it, and how are we going to continue to progress forward, I think, are the key themes that she wants to tackle. So like you said, how she's managing climate change and how she's managing the leadership of the U.S. are going to be two themes we're going to watch very closely. So thank you for your time. I know you're super busy, so we appreciate it as always, and happy Olympic Day to all.
Always a pleasure to chat with you, Britt.